All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the House Environment and Transportation Committee.
That's awesome.
January 22nd. We are starting this afternoon with a briefing by the Maryland Coordinated Permitting Review Council. We hear a lot in this committee, in this House, and in the state about challenges with permitting. And the governor last year established via executive order this Permitting Review Council, chaired by our friend, the Secretary of the Department of Planning, Secretary Flora, who we're not going to see as much of anymore. So it's great to have her in here today. We'll bring her up, and Darius White, her project team lead, to talk to us about what's going on with the Permitting Review Council.
I'll bring this up. Great. And I think there's a presentation we sent over. Is that on?
It's right here.
Oh, lovely.
Just have to.
Okay, let's do that. Perfect. Love it. Okay, well, thank you all for doing this. For the record, Rebecca Flora, Secretary of Maryland Department of Planning. Really thrilled to be here with you today and appreciate your interest in this really important topic for the state of Maryland. And Darius, go ahead and introduce yourself for the record.
Darius White, Community Design and Development Lead with Maryland Department of Planning.
Great. So, Chair, this is a briefing. So we did send over a PowerPoint. I propose I go through that, unless you want to start with anything in advance, and then we do questions. Okay, great. Well, yes, it is good to see you all because we won't be spending as much time, but hopefully we'll see you all here and there anyways. So we did put together a little short presentation to give you an overview about the Permitting Council, and I'm just going to walk through that, and then we'll answer any questions that you may have. There we go. So going over the purpose and structure briefly, and then I wanted to zero in on the deliverables because this was an executive order. As we know, permitting in the state of Maryland, very complex, all over the place, and I want to share with you some of what we've been uncovering so far. So I'll do it as I go through each of those deliverables. So purpose and structure, just to remind everybody, as I mentioned, it's an executive order. The really important thing, many pieces of this, but keep in mind, our work is specifically focused on infrastructure and place-based projects. We're not dealing with credentials or licenses or things like that. It is specifically development type projects that we're dealing with and where our focus is in terms of those types of permits. And we are essentially in place to look at state permitting specifically for those types of projects. The structure that we've put in place, essentially, obviously, I'm reporting to the governor. The council reports to the governor. I am the chair. And the administration of this council is done out of the Maryland Department of Planning. Darius has been assigned as our project lead on this, and we have a team that we've quite frankly patched together because this was one of those things that just needed to get done. And we've been trying to figure that out in terms of just pulling staff from here and there over the past year. The council itself, as per executive order, is made up of at least a deputy secretary or equivalent across all of the permitting agencies, review agencies, which are different, and funding agencies. So by that I mean primarily DHCD and Commerce. And review agencies are like Maryland Historic Trust and DNR are more of a review agency versus a permitting agency, which is more like an MDE, state highway, fire marshal, some of those types of entities that do the actual issuance of a permit. The executive order also called for a working group, which quite frankly are the worker bees, and Darius chairs that group of the folks that are really out there doing the permitting. And so while the council is subject to open meetings, we have monthly meetings. This is where we try to keep everyone updated across the agencies from a standpoint of oversight and accountability. The working group essentially brings together all of the different staff from the agencies to really get in the weeds about what's going on and why in terms of the projects. We also found that while there is an important aspect of our work as it relates to these pilot projects and understanding the systems, we also found out that from a technical standpoint, the ability to use technology and what does that look like is another part of the executive order, and we needed to really assemble a team around that, which we've done in partnership with Do It. So that's our structure. Department of Planning not only chairs on my part, but also is staffing this. But I really want to fully acknowledge all of the sister agencies that have had to sort of pull together and make this come together over the last year. Our deliverables, I'm going to dive into in 3 segments of slides, but just keep in mind, we had 1 year. We were told the executive order was launched in December of '24. We had to stand up the council by July of '25. We stood it up by April of '25, and we essentially have had a year to try to produce these deliverables. So we are fast tracking all of these things and getting a lot of work done in a very short time frame, and these are the primary pieces of what we're doing. Just standing up the council, for instance, because the council includes 4 local representatives. So we have an urban and a rural county representative that's involved in permitting, and we also have an urban and rural municipality that's involved with permitting. So we would ensure we would have that perspective, and we had to go through appointments to get those seats appointed also. So all of these things take time, obviously. I have this box off to the side, and I'm calling it supplemental. We have not been charged with doing these specific things off to the side, but we felt and compelled that it was important in order to have a full picture of what's going on with permitting in the state of Maryland. So we've taken it upon ourselves to really do a couple of things as it relates to getting a better understanding of what's happening at the local level in parallel while we dig in at the state level. So things that we're doing along those lines is we're including, at every monthly meeting, we have project presentations, we have state agency presentations, we now have local agency presentations. We've already learned that they are learning from each other just as we are learning from them. So far, we've had Baltimore City and Montgomery County. We have more scheduled because there's a lot of exchange that needs to happen at that level also. We're also planning developer roundtables. I feel like we only have a snapshot. We're reaching out to the builders associations and really beginning to partner with them to ensure we get a better picture from the developer perspective, in addition to the agency perspective. Focus groups with specific projects that we're working on are in the process right now in our next stage of work. And then we're doing an assessment, not like an audit, more of an inventory of how the different state permitting systems work, so we just have a more comprehensive picture of how those individual units work. And then essentially, we are not doing a full system technology fix build out. Quite frankly, there is not money for that. What we are doing is through our discovery process, developing what will be a set of options and approaches and ways that we could go about a bigger build out. And so that's something we've had to build into our process also, because this 1 year is not going to solve the problem. I'll be pretty frank about that. So let me just give you a snapshot on 3 segments of deliverables. Because the committee is very focused on energy and agriculture, I wanted to focus in on 2 projects in particular that are in that realm and not take up your time with all 6. We could certainly talk about all 6. To give you an idea, with our limited resources and staffing, we felt we could handle 6 pilot projects. Those are the projects that we're digging deep in on, working with. We have a Maryland Department of Planning staff person assigned to each of these projects as the liaison. And then we have project teams formed around each of these that are multi-agency teams to essentially act as problem solvers, learning, understanding as a united collaborative group. And they meet on a regular basis, and Darius heads up that work. And then we have 2 other liaisons from our office. These are the 6 projects. The criteria for the selection of them was approved by the council, and the selection of the 6 projects was done by the council, and that was done last year. We tried to have a diverse representation of not only small, but extremely large. We wanted to make sure there was a value add project in there, because those are very unique in their own way. And so we've tried to create, albeit a really strong cross-section of experiences, because every project's different. I came from the developer world in one of my past lives, and there is no project that is exactly the same. And so we needed a good cross-section, and this is the cross-section we came up with. The 2 that I want to just give you a flavor of are Quantum, Frederick, and basically these 2 slides I'll share with each of these 2 projects that I'll be sharing with you are what basically occurs every month at our council meetings. We give the council an update on progress about the project, and then the project team obviously focuses in on where we might need to add some additional collaborative power. And then we also include quarterly in our quarterly report to the governor an update on progress on these projects. Projects also don't get built in 1 year. And so it's not like we're going to expedite these projects and get them from A to Z in just the 1 year timeframe. The thing that we're doing from a tracking standpoint, just a manual tracking, is essentially identifying each agency that's responsible for each project, what permits are being reviewed by that agency, and essentially the status of it along with the developer's perspective of status. And so I wanted to mostly give you a sense of what we're capturing around these 6 projects with these slides. The other one is Burnt Hill Farm, which is interesting because it's actually completed. But we kept it on the list because there's a lot of lessons learned from that project, a lot of bumps in the road on all sides. And we're using that as a case study example so that we can learn from it in terms of this particular value add market and permitting associated with that, and how our permitting systems need to essentially be updated to reflect that type of establishment across the state. So once again, you see the template, different types of agencies involved. In this case, obviously, we've been still working closely with Department of Agriculture because they are the advocate in this case, ensuring that these types of projects happen across the state. So they're very much involved in the working groups, not necessarily permitting agency. So that's a flavor of the projects. I'm going to keep moving into the next set of deliverables, and then we can circle back if that's okay. The next set of deliverables was around this internal intake system and public-facing dashboard. That is a mouthful, and believe me, it's been even harder to try to sort through how to make that happen. The challenge is well, here's the executive order, so we, once again, reference this requirement in the executive order to do this, but you can't build an entire system fix in a year. What we can do is build a prototype, and that's what's been done. So in your slides, and I hope you received the electronic version, and we're going to point you to the website. We are really proud to say we just hit a milestone yesterday, and the prototype dashboard was launched yesterday, and you can link to it on the Permitting Council website. What it does is have the projects, actually the 5, since 1 is completed there. You can click on the project, you can identify which permits are associated with that project, you can see where it is on the map, but it gives you a really, and I'll show you on the next slide, this is the type of dashboard where you can dig in and see where each of those are happening. I really encourage you to just check it out and tool around with it. It is a prototype. It will continue to be tested through the use of these projects over the next few months so that we can learn from this and determine what that set of options might be in the future in terms of the best way to build out a bigger system for the state of Maryland. The other thing I want to point to, and this is really important, that I've experienced as a former developer, but I don't know that each of the agencies experiences. Each agency has their system, and they're working hard to fix their systems to make them as efficient as possible. But they're each doing it as an individual agency. What we are doing is something different. We're looking at it from the user developer standpoint, going into a state portal and having to go here, 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 and here. And every place they go, it could be a different project title, name, contact person, or ID number. So the beauty of what we hope could be the future for Maryland is the ability for a user to come in, have one project ID, and be able to identify all of the permits they're dealing with in one snapshot. That doesn't exist. It is what Virginia's building, it's what Pennsylvania's building, and it's what several other states are building. And that is the big difference. And that is why we need to understand each of the individualized systems and how they're working, but then also have this other lens, which is what I believe Maryland Department of Planning brings to the equation, is this more horizontal user experience lens. And so we're continuing to inventory, not to call out, you know, who's doing great, who's not, but more to understand the status and the approach that each of these individual systems are taking. And this has been a really important part of our work. It was also a really challenging part of our work because we had to manually work with those agencies to capture their data to put it into this dashboard. It's not an automated system. It had to be done manually. So that gives you a flashpoint of something that was months to try to sort through, and we're still sorting through. The final thing I want to touch on is just the other big aspect of our deliverables, which are reports and recommendations. As I mentioned earlier, we have been doing quarterly reports. We submitted and just uploaded actually the third one that we've done so far. And that's on the website. They're all posted on the website. We focus on what the accomplishments have been through the last quarter, what how our pilot projects are doing, the tracking system, how that's at, our timeline, what we're doing next, and then we try to keep a running count of who's involved. It's really important to acknowledge there are so many players involved in this. So coordinating that has been, you know, I think everybody's been working hard to just come together around this, but they're doing that, and it's taking away from processing the permits that we want everybody to process. We're trying to get them to do this over on the side. And then we obviously are keeping others through the governor's office involved and in the loop. The big thing that we're starting to turn our attention to right now is the final report. The final report, as we're beginning to really envision that, and Darius is working with me on that, is not only looking at state permitting, but there's multiple pieces about state permitting. There's multiple agencies involved. There's multiple components. There's not only the internal processes of the fact that you may have a state highway that has a different person at each local regional office, and they may review things differently. And so you've got processes that need to be looked at in terms of guidance and how they're being delivered. Those are things that can be done internally. You've got policy of, well, this is a policy or guideline, but we could update it. This is exactly what's happening with value add right now, is that what guidance or policy do we need to provide to, like, a local county for delegated authority, whether it be health or stormwater or some of those delegated authorities having common policy and guidance. And then there's, of course, statutory. You may hear from us next year because we don't know where the statutory glitches are, but we want to make sure we focus on the most important ones where there might be statute that's antiquated. I heard of one just a week ago where electronic signatures weren't allowed. You had to submit paper documents. That had to be changed. I mean, you know, we're dealing with some big overhaul need here. So the report will have those layers in it. In addition, we will be putting together, working with Do It, working with our sister agencies and others, really looking at the tech system side of this. And there's a couple of approaches that I've tried to sort of just high level. We could keep fixing all of the individualized ones and then figure out how they all talk to each other, or we have a unified system, or probably 3 or 4 other approaches. And that's something that, quite honestly, we have to work really closely with the team at Do It to really put together a set of options, which ones are going to get us the best value in terms of improvement to the system for the investment. And that's something that we hope to have included in this final report. And then finally, we really, through our outreach, want to ensure that we are getting really good understanding of user experiences. What's most important to the user? What would most make their projects move faster and better? And how can we help pinpoint that so we're not working in a vacuum? So I just covered a lot of information. I tried to get through it so that I could circle back, and I encourage you to go to the website. Here's our contact people, but I'm here for questions, Chair Corman. I hope that covered some of what you were looking for.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We'll start with Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's truly nice to see another developer in the room. Is there a methodology in place where you can track the types of permits from each jurisdiction? And the only reason I'm asking that is because we used to handle housing here. We don't any longer. But housing is an issue, and one of the issues that is relevant to housing is how to address our shortfall in our housing. And I was just wondering had you come up with a system yet to identify the number of permits and the types of permits from jurisdictions?
Partly. So House Bill, if I recall, it's a House Bill 131, which was the local permitting reporting done in
That is correct.
2024, and that was assigned to Maryland Department of Planning.
Yeah.
We actually have our first full calendar year of data on that to really understand. The totals I have are that there were 10,157 developer projects in calendar year 2024 of just the 9 jurisdictions of 150,000 population and over in that calendar year. Of those 10,000 projects, over 11,000 building permits were issued. So we're beginning to get that type of data. We don't have a good enough understanding yet because there are so many apples to oranges here of understanding. We do have data about how long it took on some of these, but that metric is really hard because without a true dashboard of knowing how it's moving through the process, you don't really know the whole picture. But I think through that House bill, and then there was another House bill that landed with planning also, my staff tells me, House Bill 1193 last year on residential permit data. So we're setting that up also in a dashboard specific to that. We're actually doing a webinar tomorrow about local permitting where we'll be sharing that information.
Can you send us that information, please?
Absolutely.
So we can follow it, if you don't mind.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr.
absolutely.
Chair.
I think it's a really good start, but I think a lot of what we're doing as our supplemental bucket, it'll get us a better understanding of what's happening.
That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Nick. And welcome Secretary Flora from Kent County.
Hi.
I want to talk about Kent County a little bit, if I may. You touched on local permitting several times in your presentation. And we're having some really severe problems in Kent County with permitting. Been going on for a year now. My understanding, and there's supposed to be some simultaneous review going on among different agencies, which is very refreshing to hear and see, rather than go through 5 points and then you miss something, you got to go back to 1 again. I'm glad to see that. But how involved are you in local zoning, say in Kent County, to help move some of this logjam forward or this confusion? I mean, we just can't get permits for anything over there. And I'm getting call after call after call from contractors that have plenty of work, can't get a permit to start a job.
We are not directly involved. As you know, zoning is local, and so the state does not reach in on local zoning. However, there's a couple of things. First of all, your economic development person in Kent County.
Jamie Williams.
Jamie came and presented at the Economic Competitiveness Subcabinet meeting a couple months ago, did an excellent job, and really brought to the attention of something that I thought was really interesting coming from a county, which was the desire to have the state actually reach in more. And we need to understand that better, because I think there's more in common right now around where that might be useful than not. And this is the whole idea of understanding what's really going on at the local level. And so I think there's a couple of things. One, what authority is delegated through statute to the local? What guidance is given through that delegation? What responsibilities are there through delegation of authority? And that is the part of this huge, complicated puzzle that I'm not going to have a short answer for you on, but it is part of what we're delving into right now. I would say the other thing you mentioned in terms of what I like to think of as, yes, I've lived this in my past life, is this iterative parallel process of do this, and then you can get to step 2, and then you can get to step 3. Oops, go back. You know, what's that old game, Chutes and Ladders? Oops. What we are trying to do, at least through this first set of sample projects, is really understand where can we double up? Where can we get more overlap of these approvals to start things rather than waiting to here, to get to here, where can we have some of that overlap? There may be, in our final recommendations, opportunities for statutory improvements of stuff that's being done just because they have to do it that way. Or it could be a policy, and it could be different in every single agency. So I wish I had a better answer for you, because I know these things are really, really challenging. But those are the kinds of things we're uncovering through what I like to think of as this discovery process, that we can get solid recommendations moving forward. But I also am trying to not paint with a broad brush the local situation, because there are so many jurisdictions, so many different levels of capacity that we don't understand it enough. People will often point to, well, it's the local. Well, no, wait a minute. Let's understand the problem better. So that's where we're at. Sorry, I wish I had a better answer.
It just seems like there are agencies going in different directions, and there's no continuity there. I mean, I was really happy to see that they were doing this review of, simultaneous review, which really was a game changer in my opinion. But we also have MDE, they're over here, and local zoning's over here. And when you were talking about, your local participation, I was just wondering what part you played in the puzzle, because the puzzle's a long ways apart right now. There's pieces missing in the middle. And, and maybe your thoughts are a good suggestion that we should get all these agencies together and find out why they're going in different directions, so we're all marching in the same direction, because it's going to be really hard to do more building and create more living facilities, whether it be new construction or whether it be rebuilding something, when you just cannot get a permit. I mean, it's terrible.
No, the stories are quite horrid. Yeah, they're quite bad. And there is a deeper story almost on every one of them. And I would say through the work that Darius is doing with his group and through the project teams, that is exactly what we're doing. We're bringing all of those agencies together around the table, at least for this first pilot set, to sort of say, how do we change this? How do we do it better? The value add project is a good one, where we brought everybody together and just said, how do we solve this? So unless we can get everyone around the table rather than working in opposite directions, that's the only way it's going to get better. Absolutely. And the local has to be part of that, ultimately.
Thank you. We'll be talking further.
Absolutely. And I welcome that. Thank you. We want to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. You mentioned working groups one or more times during your presentation. And prior to my role that I'm currently in, I remember there were some local concerns that we had at a local level with regards to some flooding issues and things of that nature. And at the conclusion of bringing that information forth to this body, it was determined that a working group would be established. And this was on a local level. And I represent 27A in Prince George's County and Charles. And many of those problems were common among the communities that we resided in. And a great benefit came out of that, because there was to be a working group established that would have community input. In other words, those disciplines that you've named, like the inspections and code enforcement and that sort of thing, there would be an inclusion of a community aspect from, at the time, homeowners and people that reside in the area. So is that something that is still occurring, or does that sound to be a fruitful avenue of approach there at all?
Well, first of all, I strongly encourage, on a county basis, most likely, because I know Montgomery County did a really great working group also around this. I really encourage that to happen, because to the extent that each county can get on the same page of, how their systems are working, where they need help from the state, that helps us do our job better. I think the working group that we're doing, and keep in mind the council, is charged to focus on state permitting only. Because I head up Maryland Department of Planning and we deal so much at the local level, felt that we couldn't do our job well unless we tried to at least understand the local situation better. I honestly don't have the staff or resources to dive as deep as I would like to on that front, but we're going to do our best to at least have a better picture of it. But I strongly encourage counties to come together. And we've been obviously in touch with MACO, and in fact, the presentation we're doing tomorrow is a webinar. Dom from MACO is on it. We have Lori Graff from the Building Institute on it. We have Commerce on it and DHCD. And we're just bringing everybody together and saying, hey, we need to talk about this. So yes and yes. But if you have thoughts, please let us know. And Darius hasn't had a chance to say anything, but the working group you head up, just say how you're handling that.
Sure. So just to give some clarification, the council is the overarching body that, provides accountability for this charge, but the working group is focused on the actual work. So as it relates to, the council meeting is open to the public, and the working group meeting is more of a closed door, handle the issues in-house. But we're currently in a process where we are strategically conducting outreach. So we're going to be having a roundtable that brings in building professionals, architects, contractors, the users of state permitting systems. And we're going to invite them out and offer them an opportunity to provide feedback into our final report. So we're a bit more strategic as it relates to the outreach, but the council is more of the public entity that invites the public out to weigh in on the work that we're doing.
But I would add is, thank you, Darius. And as our final report recommendations, one of those recommendations, and I'm not saying it is, it could be that, we need to take that next step at the local level. We need to bring, county working groups together to take that next step of where do we because we get push-pull. People are saying, stay out, and other people saying, come on in, So we need to get some common understanding of where counties across the board would like the state to intervene more. And that, I don't think there's a common sense of that right now.
Right, and I thank you for your responses. I just think that from the experience that I had at that time, which has been over 5 years ago, I think, we got a good product from it. Mm-hmm. And we actually found some concerns that although the builders, developers, and all could agree upon was a legitimate concern. Mm-hmm. And it showed how it was manifested from our typical homeowners, So I think it was a benefit there, and I wish we could, I'd like to talk a little more about that.
I would love to have Darius follow up with you, and if you have a copy of that report, I'd love to get it from you also, so we can add that to what we're collecting right now. That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll work on that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Let me just say that first, I come from a Montgomery County perspective, so I totally appreciate the local permitting, the DPS issues here. A great deal of my district is in the agricultural reserve, so there are a lot of agritourism, including Burn Hill Farm is very close to my district, mm-hmm. right on the border. But my question is there have you looked at any situations where perhaps another agency that's not strictly a government agency, I'm thinking of the Soil Conservation District, mm-hmm. whether mm-hmm. they should be brought into these processes? Because oftentimes what I'm hearing, mm-hmm. Particularly with respect to this issue of stormwater management on these farms, is that there isn't really the knowledge mm-hmm. or the understanding of what stormwater management looks like in those situations versus what it looks like, for example, in Montgomery County and, in Gaithersburg, for example. And I just wondered if you have done anything to try to bring in some of that perspective in your work.
First of all, yes, thank you. It just speaks to the fact that there is yet another entity like soil conservation districts. And I know, I was just looking at my notes, the Quantum Frederick project does have that entity involved in Quantum Frederick, for instance. And I know in Montgomery County, the value add projects and what we're working through right now, and MDA and MDE are both very involved and working with Montgomery County with a particular project. But thank you for flagging that. I think we can reach, it's the same situation where they're different in every locality. And that's part of our challenge in Maryland, is that it's, and from a developer perspective, you don't know what you're walking into because it's different in every jurisdiction. You've got some things that are common, but even at the state level, sometimes there isn't commonality because you've got different reviewers or some delegation to local offices. So it's something, if we are going to be economically competitive as a state, we really do have to figure out where we can have the best impact to address these. But I appreciate you bringing up the Soil Conservation Authority. We'll make sure we do a double check on that with how do we make sure we engage those entities.
Yeah, thank you. And anything you have in that area, I would be interested in a follow-up once you gather some data.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's why I have Darius here, to make sure I don't lose any of these requested follow-ups.
Thank you.
Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Secretary Ford, thank you very much for coming today. I'm going to follow up sort of where Delegate Jacobs and Delegate Foley were. When we look at the permitting process in the state, I don't think there's a single person here who says they don't hear complaints about in the county at the state level. Recognizing that, you know, some counties have larger municipalities and budgets and things like that. But then you got the agencies at the top. And you're talking about your dashboard and things like that. But oftentimes I've witnessed when I was commissioner for 12 years, you know, you have competing factions, I'll say between agriculture, natural resources, environment, and we're trying to sort of get to the same place, yet they have different interpretations of the rules, and then the conflict comes down to, you know, environment versus ag versus natural resources, and the developer, I just want to get something done, and it turns out that I'm just using those three agencies. Trust me, there's a whole bunch more in that game too. Do you have any suggestions on how these agencies can start to interpret, we'll say COMAR, in the same light? And I think you clearly pointed out before, there's such turnover sometimes these departments. You know, you could have a reviewer in July, and they come back with questions, and you get them in September, there's a new person in October. I don't know how you know, when we get these questions, you know, we don't have answers, and then we get beat up. Why don't you have an answer? Hell, I don't know. So there we go.
You're right, and it is absolutely what we're seeing. And I think the good news I have is that the secretaries all talk to each other. So
We see that too.
Very much so. So I was just with Secretary Addix on Friday. I was just with Secretary McElwain's team that's working on this issue related to Burnt Hill Farm like 2 hours ago. The fact that
I'm pretty sure you're with Secretary Addix right now.
Oh, is he back here? We all share information, so we can basically say, well, wait a minute, what's going on over here? Oh, I don't know, let's pull them in. You know, it's like, that's where I think we have to probably see the shining star of optimism here, is that we have to be able to talk to each other and collaborate on this, because yes, we all have a mission, and each one of us focused on our mission, but if those conflict and they don't help us get to the end game of economic competitiveness, if we look at that as the big frame, no one's going to win. And so what we've learned, and once again, we just have this very small sample size of 6 projects, but through the work that Darius and the others on the team have been doing, just get everybody in the same room and working through it and sort of saying, well, wait a minute, stormwater permitting guidance in this case, where you've got a lot of impervious surface, is not the same as when you're on a farm. And so we're actually in the middle of those conversations right now. What's coming out of that, literally 2 hours ago in the conversation I was in, was that there is a need for enhanced guidance from the state to the local jurisdictions who are overseeing something like stormwater, and basically understanding those kinds of special circumstances and creating better guidance that can be used consistently across the state. And we're literally in the middle of that right now as it relates to Burnt Hill.
And thank you. I think it's a great idea because as Secretary Foley, or Delegate Foley, I'll get it out, don't worry.
Not secretary.
Well, you want to be one? We'll let you be one. Anyhow, as she points out, sometimes the soil conservation districts are better equipped to handle the local issues than somebody sitting in Annapolis who, I read a book and saw a picture, and therefore, the book and the picture know more than what the person on the ground does. So that just, I think she brings up a very good point. Thank you.
Yeah, and everything's contextual. If you don't get boots on the ground and really look at the situation or really understand the topography or the adjacencies or the soils, it's hard to make a determination, but we could still do better with guidance. This is where my vision for that final report is to sort out these issues of process, policy, regs, and try to at least identify those top ones that we need to try to address. And we're literally in the trenches addressing them right now for the 6 projects we're focused on, and those are how we're bringing these issues to the surface. But if you all have, other thoughts or things that, I gave you a big snapshot, go to the website. If you have other thoughts, please feed them our way, because we're looking at pushing to get this final report done and done well by the end of June.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, Madam Secretary, a lot of the problems that are being described are, they're not unique to Maryland. Multiple departments, state and local government, lack of money for IT. So are there any states that you're looking at that are doing this particularly well that we can kind of model off of? Because every state has the same challenge.
Yes, thank you. And of course, we're most concerned about our competing neighbors. In fact, when this initiative started, it first was looking at Fast 41, which was a federal program being put in place for environmental permitting. From there, we began to look at, we had heard about what Virginia was doing. We actually, through the work we're doing, I didn't mention it on our deliverables, but we've also done research. So we've actually been in touch with, and everybody's been very friendly about it in terms of our neighboring states. We've been in touch with Delaware, Pennsylvania, Virginia, others who have been happy to share information. We're all learning from each other to a degree. I would say, from what I can tell, Virginia had the biggest jump start. And they were undertaking their effort agency by agency. And so they hired a consultant team, $10 to $12 million initiative over about 4 years by consultants to come in and essentially build the system. And they're doing it agency by agency. So their approach was to go agency by agency and build a common system for utilization, starting with environment. Pennsylvania started with environment also. We've sort of taken that model just because of where we're at, and these will be some of the options we'll be putting forth in the report, along with some of that research of what others are doing. But I would say Virginia's probably most in the lead right now. Pennsylvania's close behind, and we're really just getting started.
Thank you. Delegate Naraki?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here. I apologize for being a little bit late, so you might have already touched on this, but I'm coming at this from a slightly different perspective. I've had some really big projects be approved in my district recently, many at the county level. So I don't want to say this is really not a state issue, but I want to get your expertise and your guidance on it. And it felt like the process was not very transparent. Public notices weren't done the way that they should. Community feedback was not sought in the way that I think even the law says that it should occur on these projects. So I just want to get your thoughts on not only how we can make the process more efficient, because I think that is absolutely paramount, but I do think that transparency piece is also very important as well. And if you have any thoughts on how we can maybe encourage some of our colleagues at the local government level also to kind of, take up some of those measures a little bit more. So just kind of wanted your feedback on that.
Excellent question, and it gives me the opportunity to follow back to Chair Corman's question. What we heard from Virginia is that they increased their overall efficiency in their permitting by about 80%, just from what they believed was from transparency alone. And so while things like the tools of the dashboard, which when you look at your materials, you'll see the dashboard we just launched. Go in there, you'll love it.
the notion of building something where that transparency, which is part of the requirement of the executive order to delve into, really makes a difference, because it is a big black box. And people don't know where they're at in the system. They don't know all the pieces that are in the system, whether it be local or state. And so you've really hit the nail there, because to the extent we can make these the permitting process part of a holistic system that is transparent, I think will go a long way. And if we can build in at least some component, certainly at least for these maybe larger jurisdictions, the local piece of that, because you might see a dashboard and all of a sudden, whoa, what happened? Nothing's been going on for 6 months. If you don't know that that's stuck over here in a local approval process, then you're kind of wondering, where's that project? So we've got to be able to, big picture, integrate that. Now, some localities, Montgomery County being one of them, and I know Baltimore City were a couple we've been really impressed by in terms of some of the work they're already doing, and I'm sure there's others. One thing I will say, and I'm sorry, I'm going to diverge just one thing because you remind me of something. One thing we are learning is that there are expedited permitting processes that seem to be working quite well. There is a fee-based approach to doing that in some cases. My large concern with all of these permitting issues is the large projects that can afford highly sophisticated teams that really know how to do this because they've been doing it forever. They're going to get through. They will get through somehow. It's the small and mid-sized projects that I worry about, because, you know, a value-add project, they're just trying to run their farm. You know, they don't have large teams or time or the knowledge to get to the other end. You know, and we've got everything in between, and the more we pull our limited permitting review staff over here to expedite, that means they can't work over here too, because we still only have so many staff. So this is why I really believe that a long-term thinking approach to get a better system in place makes us more efficient, so that then we can make the staff time that we do have more efficient. AI is part of this too. I don't want to forget the fact that AI could be part of this in the future in terms of some aspects of reviews. So I kind of get geeky on this. I'm glad it was assigned to planning. We're very much of a horizontal agency. We don't do permitting. We do reviews under historic trust, but I think you need that lens looking across it all. So I diverged a bit, but the transparency is a critical, which is why the dashboard is critical. But keep in mind, a tool is only as good as the data inputs, and without the permitting council, the project teams, the project liaisons, the direct work with the projects and the users, then the dashboard will not be as effective if somebody just went off and built that without all of those other feedback loops that have to go with it. So it has to be a holistic approach.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, I do not see any further questions, so thank you, Secretary Floor. I know it's an executive-driven process set up by an executive order, but we're obviously very interested in the report. I think in addition to repealing some old statutory provisions like you were describing, there might be an opportunity to codify some of the work the council's doing, and then, of course, get legislative buy-in if we do need to make an IT investment, which I think would be very, very useful. So I hope you'll stay engaged with us on it. Really appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely, and I really thank you all for your interest in this. It's a topic that people think, oh, just expedite. And we're like, no, it's so complicated. So appreciate your interest and your time in viewing this, and check out the website. Let us know if we can help you or follow up with anything. Appreciate it.
And enjoy your new life in Economic Matters.
Take
colleagues, we have to reboot the system to turn over for the next briefing, so we'll take 3 or so minutes. So try not to go far, and see you shortly.